Hi, Lauren Jobson here, and this week I am talking about our emotions. So, emotions have their own logic, okay? It's separate and different from our intellectual logic. This is why they're not rational. This is why we can think one thing but feel completely different. And it is why we're feeling emotions, whether we realize what label to that emotion it is or not. We can sometimes know better and say things to ourselves where we know we can feel differently, but we feel what we feel anyway because they are separate. So I'm going to talk to you about emotional logic and what we can do that can help us process our emotions, because we are always in process. I love this idea that if we think about being in process, I feel that can allow us to, one, know that it is just a process that we can move through. And also, it has me think that it can allow us to not be attached to the present moment. So, but actually, let me finish that. Not be attached to the present emotion too strongly, because if we can understand it's a process, well, then we know that there's a next step, something coming and a way for us to move along. Okay, so notice I say move along, because we don't want to feel or know or think that we have to just feel an emotion and then let it go or change it immediately, but rather, again, this beautiful process. So emotional logic works in two ways. Now, I'm going to give just a little bit of jargon, but then I will explain what that means. I'm going to use some technical words. So emotional logic works in two ways: cause and effect and complex equivalence. So just think cause and effect. There's a cause that causes an effect. The second thing is complex equivalence. It comes from NLP language. And what we just need to know with that is think of an equal sign. This equals this. So let me talk about cause and effect first. Our emotions work in the idea that if we have had a cause a certain effect before, well, then the emotions go, if that cause happens again, well, then the effect will be the same. Okay, so because we are emotional beings, and the way our unconscious mind works, without going into depth here and now and today on how our unconscious mind works, but let me just say our emotions come from our unconscious mind. Well, how it works is that it stores all of our memories, and it remembers the negative emotions and positive emotions from those memories and in those memories. So it links it together. And when we have unresolved negative emotions, it stores it in our body like a stuckness, a stagnant part of energy that has linked that negative emotion to that negative event. And how our then body reacts, because that is then our body wisdom, is when the body is triggered, at a completely different time. So say it's like 10 years on, 20 years on, from a time in the past where something happened and it created a negative emotion. If one hasn't revisited that event, what we call resolve in coaching and transformational therapy, there is a way to totally listen, connect to the unconscious mind and resolve the emotion. But if that doesn't happen, it's called an unresolved negative emotion stored at the unconscious mind and stored then in the body, okay? Because our unconscious mind is the part of us that runs our body, protects our health. It's doing everything for us unconsciously, right? It's keeping our body alive. And it has all the memories of the past, and it creates our behaviors. It does so much for us. And when a event happens that is similar to the time in the past, that energy in our body from the past memory gets what we can call triggered. And the psyche, by the way, actually reverts back to that time of when we were much younger and we had less resources. So the psyche goes back to that past experience that's linked with that negative emotion, and all of a sudden this emotion comes up. And so when we think about emotions happening and the emotional logic being cause and effect, well, that means it is to say that when the body is reminded of a similar event, if it feels similar to the past event, well, then it's going, that causes me to feel that negative emotion. And can you see how that's then disempowering in a way of lack of choice, lack of resources, because the psyche again goes back to a less resourceful time. Like, for example, when we were a young child and we literally depended on our adults in our world to keep us safe, right? Cause and effect, it's a big one. So what it means is if we're being triggered in the present moment, we might need to sit with it. And I'm going to give you a process soon. I've got a beautiful, what do you call it? Anagram? Phonetic, I can't even think at the moment, but I've got a beautiful process that I can share with you, and it's called See Our Emotions, but it's SEA. We want to sense and sit with our emotions. We want to notice the story. So S stands for sense the emotion, sit with it. Notice the stories that you're playing in your mind, because that can have you be alerted to what is the cause from the past that's making you feel this negative emotion. Okay, because then we want to emote and evaluate the emotion that's going on for us. So C, our emotions, but SEA. So the E stands for emote. We want to be able to express that emotion and evaluate it. And then A stands for, accept the emotion. We want to have acceptance, and we also want to feel into what action could we take. So then it's about the action that we can take. So when it comes to cause and effect, we could be asking ourselves, if we're feeling negative emotions in the present moment, we could ask ourselves, what is this triggering in me from the past, where my unconscious mind thinks this past cause causes this effect? But could it be different? The resolution and the beautiful resolving comes from understanding that as much as our emotions think that that's true, we want to honor our emotions to feel that that's true. And then we want to process and go, I am an adult now with so many more resources than I had back then. And I can just parent my inner child or my past self. I can parent that part of me that feels stuck back at that time and give myself all of the wonderful resources that I now have, such as safety, love, allowance and acceptance and permission to be ourselves and to express ourselves. And those are just some examples of what I mean by resources that we have now as an adult that we didn't understand or have access to or have connection to. We always have access to it, but we lost that connection. We lost that access to those beautiful, wonderful, innate resources that we are born with. And of course, life just gets on top of us and has us feel like we don't have those resources anymore. And so the second emotional logic is what I called complex equivalence. It's the equal sign. So anytime we have an identification, such as I am not good enough, is actually a complex equivalence. It's an identification. It just is saying I equals not good enough, or I equals not confident, I equals shy, I equals not good at something, I equal not lovable, I equal whatever it is for you. Here's an example from my own life. I have been having a relationship to fertility, and I must admit, I, for a number of years, have called it infertility. But recently I have really coached myself to realize that I don't need to say the word infertility anymore. I can just say it's my relationship to fertility, because what has been happening for me is a massive complex equivalence and identification of I equals infertile, or I equals infertility problems. I have infertility problems. So emotions work in this logic. And because this emotional logic is separate to intellectual logic, is because, again, we might know that we are no longer a child, or that we have all these resources and ways that we can access support. But the emotions just go, if I equals that, well, then we then create negative stories about that. Again, it's very much a link to, say, the past. If I equals that, well, then I'm always going to be that. So if as a child we felt not good enough, well, then we project into our future. As we live in the now, we project into our future from a place of feeling not good enough. So our emotional logic asks us, and I have come up with this, we need to see our emotions, SEA. We need to sense the emotion, sit with it, and notice the stories that we are telling ourselves. What is our self-talk about this emotion? And then we can find resourceful, beautiful ways to emote it, to express it. I've heard of emotions be referred to as energy in motion. That's totally just that. They're just totally energy in motion. And we can evaluate as we process this emotion that we're feeling. And we can ask ourselves, and in that evaluation, check in and sense and see, is it from a time in our past where we still feel what happened in our past to be true and the only truth? And again, that would mean that we need to, possibly with a coach's help, go back to our past self and start parenting, giving the resources to our inner past selves, who again feel stuck back at those unpleasant and unresourceful times, so that we can then answer the call to our emotion. We can accept the emotion. So that means, forgive ourselves if we've been feeling really negative. Sometimes we actually want to go easy on our judgment that we feel that emotion in the first place, and then we want to act. We want to feel into and sense from all of this beautiful processing, feel into what piece of action do you need to take to process, move on to the next step. Because the idea is that we do let the emotions go, so that our pasts are resourceful and not emotional. Meaning, it means when we think of our past, we can think of any and every event with an appreciation of learnings. Now, it doesn't mean that we appreciated the event happening, but rather it means in the present moment we are not triggered by that or being brought down, or the emotion doesn't even come up in our body in the present moment when we think about a past time. That is how you know you have processed the emotion and you have resolved it. So I hope this has been helpful. There's actually a lot of complexity in what I've just shared. And so I've been speaking a little bit fast towards the second half of this video. And I hope that's okay. Yeah, just feeling into, is there anything else I wanted to share? No, I guess I just wanted to honor the complexity that I've shared with you today. And if you have any questions about what I've shared, absolutely, please ask me. All right, big love. By the way, all this information is in my upcoming book that I'll publish early next year. It's called Your Happily Ever After: Your Journey in Learning to Love Who You Are and Create a Life That You Love. It's all about the relationship we have with ourselves. Big love. I'll speak to you soon.